Clarity After Scientology. Tonight we actually have Aaron Smith-Levin with us. Hello, Aaron.
Hello, everybody.
How is everything going after the premiere of the somewhat final episode of The Aftermath of Scientology?
Yeah, wow, it was quite an episode last night. It's one of these things where there's so much feedback I can't even keep up with it. Like, we're at almost 2,000 people joined the Supporters of Leah Remini Facebook group since the episode aired last night and right now.
Wow.
And then the page is just blowing up, and it's good stuff. By the way, logistical stuff real quick. So I've never done Google Hangouts where someone else was recording. Is your thing working where when I talk, my face goes big, and when you talk, your face goes big?
Yes, it does. Oh, that just happened.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, so there's actually 3 more specials that will air for this season, but that was the final. For production purposes, there's regular episodes and then there's specials, and that was the final special. So, and I think the reason they call it the season finale is because they use the specials as filler. I think chances better than likely there will be a season 3, and they like to remind people that there's a show. So they're not necessarily committed to airing those 3 specials over the next 3 weeks. They might air one every month, between the end of season 2 and the beginning of hopefully season 3. So I think that's why they bill it as the season finale.
Yeah. I actually really hope, and not to get off track here, but I do hope they do the episode about Danny Masterson, because that is like a real button for me as far as Hollywood goes, and then that leading into pedophilia. And I know if the show does continue, it's going to have to go in that route, because that's such a huge thing in society. And it's I don't even want to talk about it. I'm going to get emotional. It's nasty. Okay, so steering away from that, you've mentioned in the interview we did that you and I both met down at the Flag Service Org. We did the Gold Edge Tech training together. One thing I don't remember actually is, because I know you got there around 1993, 94.
Yep, that's right. 93. It was definitely 93. Yeah.
Okay. And why did you go down there at that time? What did you go down to train for?
So the original, I'll try not to be too technical. The original goal was to train as an auditor. After Scientology won its tax exemption from the IRS, David Miscavige launched a huge initiative to try to bring people back into Scientology who had fallen away. He issued what he called an amnesty. Anyone who had fallen away or had gotten in trouble or whatever could come back in and confess their sins, and all would be forgiven and right with the world. And so this was, coinciding with that, he told every Church of Scientology that they had to get 20 people into full-time training to become relatively high-class auditors. And all those people were supposed to be sent to to the Flag Service Organization here in Clearwater. And so we were one of the 20. And actually, I guess I should correct that. They weren't supposed to send 20 people to Flag. They were supposed to get 20 people into full-time training to be an auditor. Correct. And you're supposed to send the best of those to Flag.
Correct.
We actually had 6 people from the Philadelphia org at Flag, which was the most of any other org in the East U.S. I'm not sure if it was the most of any other org in the U.S., any regular Class 5 organization.
It actually absolutely was.
Is that right? Yeah. And so, but one of the reasons that was also considered kind of cool is because David Miscavige is from Philadelphia. So it was considered that we were representing by having more outer org trainees from the Philadelphia org than anyone else. It was definitely, people took pride in that David Miscavige was from Philadelphia. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, I was recruited into staff because I got into Scientology in 1993, right before the IS or War is Over event. And I got recruited onto staff in I think it was March of 1994, based on the 20 people. My mother was the senior CS of the org at the time. And she basically recruited me in. And I was pretty, yeah. Yeah. My mother got into Scientology in 1986, 1987, and joined staff in 87. Went down to Flag in 88 and trained and got through class 4 internship in like 10 months.
I did not know that your mom had been in Scientology.
Yep. And Debbie, the old CEO of the FSO, was her senior intern soup.
Is that right?
Yep.
I never knew that. Even when we were doing your interview the other day, I'm sitting here thinking, Jeff walked into a Church of Scientology one day. He was like 22 years old.
Well, yeah, kind of.
I guess I have not been paying attention.
Okay, so so you got there in 93. I followed in January of 95. I was already on the TTC, the Technical Training Corps. I was going to train as an auditor as well, but then I got talked into going to Flag for supervisor training, and the wife, or Danielle, actually followed me a couple weeks later, and she was going to train as the ward clearer. And we ended up having another guy come down about 6 months later who never really worked out. So it really kind of just was the two of us. So now you guys had, you and your brother as supervisors. Edward and Allie were both ward clearers?
Edward was also a supervisor. Allie was a ward clearer.
Okay.
And then Kim Loss was, well, that's the thing. Well, here's the thing. Everyone's thing changed of what they were going to be when we went down there. So we went down there to be auditors. Everybody was supposed to be auditors.
Right.
And then when the golden age of tech came out, me, Edward, and Allie were made into supervisors and word clearers. Oh, that's the thing with Colin. If you remember, Colin was there to be an auditor, but he got sent home before the evolution started. So Colin was never even slated to be a soup. He was offloaded before the golden age of tech officially started. And because remember, we were all doing like pro TRs and metering without knowing that the golden age of tech was supposed to be happening soon.
Right.
And so me, Edward, and Allie became the two supervisors and a word clear, and then Kim and my mom stayed at Flag to do auditor and case supervisor training, and that was that.
Okay. Now, do we really get into this nitty gritty on what the golden age of tech was about as an explanation?
We should explain it because it has to do with why it was in some ways the beginning of the end of Scientology.
Okay.
I mean, you could probably say that about certain different aspects in Scientology's history, but the golden age of tech was one of the beginnings of one of the ends.
Okay. So I'll take the lead on it, and keep me honest. From kind of taking everything from memory of almost 22 years ago at this point, or 22 and a half years ago.
It doesn't seem like it's been that long until you think of everything that's happened between then and now.
No, it does not. Okay, so the investigation was that David Miscavige was at the Flag Land base at some particular time and was watching over videos and noticed that auditors were miscalling FNs.
Oh boy! So there. I don't remember that being well, go ahead. Keep going. Keep going.
That was kind of the catalyst. And what was done was what's called, per L. Ron Hubbard's policy, an investigation, which is a very precise procedure administratively of coming down to what's referred to as a why, or a reason that has a full explanation and a full handling. And that notice of the floating needles, noticed that another outpoint came up that auditors' patter and knowing how to handle basic rudimentary actions in auditing were not as precise as expected per the tech. Then that got, pull a string on that a little bit further, and it came down to that the drilling in the course room were basically two people like you and I would pair up on level 0 to train as an auditor, as auditor training, and we would drill each other. And maybe there was somebody who's a little bit higher trained around that could come and give us some, scenarios that we're going to run into at level 0. But we're pretty much, you and I were drilling each other, which led to the why being the blind leading the blind, meaning that you have no idea what you're doing. I have no idea what I'm doing because neither one of us have any experience. So then we have the blind leading the blind, which opened up this door to to the golden age of tech, which was really like a set standard set of drills, which was preceded by an auditor learning a lot of patter of different aspects of that particular level of what they're going to be running in sessions. And then they would sit in front of an emulator or simulator, which simulated different reads. And the coach would actually have a script that he followed along with, telling you what reads to do. And then the auditor would basically have to follow along and pass or fail based on the script.
Sure.
Simple solution.
So there, Miscavige put out a whole bulletin from the Religious Technology Center detailing the sequence of this supposed investigation. And for the life of me, though, you have to remind me on this. So I remember, obviously, the culmination of the investigation was the reason all auditors suck is the blind have been leading the blind. But I can't remember what made him, what the beginning of the investigation was that that it seems like auditors suck. Was it that so many people were not FNing at the examiner at Flag? Like,
it was the miscalling of FNs.
Yeah, but that's a specific, very technical thing that doesn't have to do with auditors not knowing how to audit. That's just auditors miscalling FNs. Or was it like I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong. I'm not putting the pieces together in my mind here.
Well, that was a catalyst. So why, so the question you have to always ask when doing an investigation is why. Okay, so they're miscalling
the proper things to do to make a real FN, so they were doing unusual solutions of calling FNs that weren't there.
Correct. Despite the fact, okay.
sounds like he'd have to really reach to be like, but okay, that's fine. You're jogging.
But when in retrospect, looking at it, well, why is he doing that? I mean, we can get into a whole conversation of what RTC's true responsibilities per what their mission statement is, but why wasn't it Ray Madoff or a senior CS into office overlooking this and seeing this? Why did he specifically spot this?
And especially since we're just, thinking out loud here, in hindsight, in order to make the adjudication that people are miscalling FNs, you have to assume that you know what an FN is and someone else doesn't. Right?
Exactly.
And so, because he had to redefine what an FN was in order to be able to say people had been miscalling them. So that goes a little deeper, like, well, why the fuck did you do that, dude?
Yeah, I mean, you're going exactly in the same thought pattern. Same thought pattern. Well, that's why I brought up, why wasn't it? I mean, he was a trained Class 4 auditor back from the late 60s, early 70s.
But not under Ron.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly
right. So, like, his knowledge of what a floating needle is didn't have any special source that was any better than any other auditor in the world.
Exactly.
But he decided he knew better.
Right.
Right.
But see that. But this is where the downfall really occurred, because I mean, whatever one has to say about Scientology and one has to say about L. Ron Hubbard and everything that happened in the 80s, he left behind a kick-ass team of people
in management.
And yes, within management. And I've actually had the brief moments of meeting several people over over my years in Scientology, and they were amazing human beings. And that this one person you just all of a sudden catapults off from the left-hand side in here and says you're all wrong is kind of why I brought up to you before we started this, the beginning of the end of Scientology was at this point.
So how friendly do we want to make this video to people who've never been in Scientology?
I had thought about that before, and I think let's just talk. And if we go along and go ahead, I understand obviously we want to make sure that words are understood and what we're talking about, so concepts are understood. But I think it's good that you and I just chat, because
we'll
just take it as it is.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Yeah. So one thing I would like the world and the former Scientology world and whatever world to understand is this evolution that occurred between late 1995 and mid 1996. At the time was the biggest training evolution like this that had occurred in Scientology. It was also mashing it into the Scientology world for the first time. Like, before LRH died, Scientologists had no fucking idea who David Miscavige was. And so even into that, remember, that was only 86, right? 4 years later, it's already 1990. Scientologists still barely know who David Miscavige is.
Exactly.
IRS is only 1993. Like, so by the time you and I get to Flag, the Scientology world has only recently really come to know who David Miscavige is. But like you said, when LRH died, he left behind a kick-ass team, and that kick-ass team became, those people became very famous people in Scientology. And the Golden Age of Tech is one of the first times where he started to impose himself as being more important than all of those people. Like a CEO of a company who has a giant C-suite of executives and his board of directors doesn't hold himself up as the most important person. I mean, in the real world, in large, I'm smarter than everybody, I'm better than everybody, you're all a bunch of fuck-ups. They are good at giving praise to others and delegating to others, right? And wanting others to be viewed as having a lot of authority. And right, you agree with that concept? That's how executives manage.
Absolutely.
Miscavige, this is where he started to do the opposite. I'm having to come and fix everything because all of you guys screwed it all up for the last 30 years. So you have 1,000 staff members from all around the world brought to Flag to train under the direct guide of David Miscavige. He briefed us personally. We knew our orders were coming from him personally. And maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit here and making this point, but this was a king the reins, but putting his fingers directly into the pie of every organization in the world so that no one could have any doubt who was running the show from the top to the bottom. And I don't even say that critically. I just say it factually because I actually respected the hell out of it. I loved that time period of my life. It was a lot of fun for me. It was a growing experience for me, cult or otherwise, bullshit or otherwise. For me, it wasn't a waste of time because of the age that I was at the time. I mean, it's not like I lost the prime years of my life. I was doing things. I was having fun with people my age, whereas if I was in high school, I would have been having fun with people my age. Now, I'm not saying high school wouldn't have been helpful, but the amount of fun that people have in high school or the learning experience that high school is for many was for me. It's what that experience at that time was for me. I just wanted to, yeah, I wanted to at that time to the world of Scientology.
You actually cut out a little bit. Can you ask that again?
Yeah, I was, it seemed to be frozen for quite a while. What's the last thing you heard me say?
You were going to ask me something.
Oh, I don't remember that. What's the last thing you actually heard me say? Other than that.
You've been talking about you not losing anything from that age because you're still around. You were still around people around your same age. So missing out high school wasn't. You know, it's all basically relative. We're all basically relative.
So I'm not sure. The last thing I said might have gotten cut off. So you know that I don't know the growing experience that high school might be for some people is kind of what the Flag experience was for me at that time. But I think the main point I was making there is just how important, what the significance of this training evolution was to the world of Scientology at that time.
Yes. And to the point you actually just brought up, so you were, if I remember, 15 when I got there?
I was 15 when I left in May 2006.
Okay, so and I was 24, so we're about 10 years apart from each other. So yeah, you had a very particular point in life, as you know, I was still, relatively speaking, still very young as well. And to, you know, kind of go along with and agree with what you're saying, I really myself, the same thing. I learned so much from being there. You know, during the program, the responsibilities I was given within the group itself, and then obviously when we finished our training, and because you and I both finished around the same time, which we'll get to in a second, but the running, you know, basically running internships and the amount of respect that we all earned, or a handful of us earned, for the amount of work we put in for it. And that really, from that point forward in my life, I had right before then, I had very little motivation in my life. And that's where my motivation in life has kicked in, and my work ethic has kicked in.
Yeah.
from that point.
Yeah, exactly. And again, you know, we're not saying join Scientology and go to Flag so you too can. We're just saying a lot of times people seem to think it was all bad. And I go, you're not giving Scientologists enough credit if you think it's all bad. If someone joins this group and it was all bad from the beginning and they stayed for that long, they'd be a bunch of fucking idiots.
Yeah, exactly.
It's important to understand that it wasn't all bad so that you can understand how people wind up in it for so long.
Yeah. So you had brought up that we had been personally briefed by Mr. Miscavige, David Miscavige, and we were the first ones, I think, after the staff that had been given the briefing about the whole Golden Age of Tech and showing all the drill packs and the simulators and the new, he didn't announce it at first, but the new quantum.
The new e-meter.
Yes, which we're now 2 more generations later, we have a new e-meter again. I have some questions to ask at the end of this about Golden Age of Tech 2 and some other things. All right, so we do our training. You had actually gone through the pro metering course, correct?
I had not. I was on the final video line, but I had not received the pass.
Okay. So you went right into the we did the student hat, which we did like 3 different evolutions of the student hat. I think I did that course. By the time we walked out of there, I did it 5 different times.
Yeah. So is that right?
Yeah.
Do you okay, so I was mid the metering course, but I think okay, so the first thing we did was the study certainty drills and then the new Pro Soup course. Like, whereas the other people that came later who had not done Flag Pro TRs, upper indocs, and metering, they did the version of the Soup course that had the TRs and upper indocs and metering on the Soup course.
Correct.
But because they weren't requiring all of these trainees to get Flag metering video passes, well, that's relevant. I guess the question is, did they sit down and make us do the entire student hat right when the Golden Age of Tech evolution officially started, or did we just do the study certainty drills?
Well, I brought that up because when you were on the pro metering course, they obviously Flag had known that this was coming soon. Something was coming soon. So I had actually finished the pro TRs and upper index TRs course, and I'm like, okay, great, I get to get on the metering course. And like, no, hold on. And then they pulled a bunch of people together that were at the same point I was at, and we went through and did the which I'll explain. But we did the student hat course. We got word cleared all the way through the student hat course. Method 4 word clearing.
So you're talking about the LRHED 174 handling, where everyone read, star rated, and M4'd the entirety of the student hat. Like the
and then we went back and redid it again.
Frickin' program did that.
Yeah, then we went back and redid it again. That's what I mean. I did that course, and then we had to do the study certainty course.
Right, you do the course, then you M4 the whole course, then you do it again. Did I have it right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Good times.
And I think the second time I finished it in like 10 days.
Yeah. A good exercise, but you know, if you have nothing else to do.
Yeah. Okay, so we get to the pro metering, we get to the pro soup course. You were the first one done out of all the trainees.
Right.
I don't know if you remember this, but I do because it's very special to me. But I was like number 4 or 5 behind you, but Danielle was the first word clear done. So we were technically the first team done. But because we were only 2 of us, we did get any praise for it, because the next day, like San Francisco Day, I'll never forget this. San Francisco Day ended up finishing like 2 days later. They got to go up on stage at graduation and talk. Danielle and I spoke to the staff. Like,
wow.
Thanks, guys.
I remember me and Edward DiMartino, we got to go to the Flag staff meeting. And after we finished our course, we like attested. And then that dinner, we were at the Flag staff muster talking to them. That was, you know, we're 15 years old. We're talking to, you know, over 1,000 people.
That was pretty cool. So what for you, I mean, you had grown up in Scientology, but this is the first time I would gather from everything that you said that you really took what you're doing seriously.
Yes.
I was very new to Scientology, meaning that I was in for only about 2 or 3 years at this point. This was still all new to me. I didn't know anything about anyone. How validating was it for you to not only be the first person, but to have finished this program?
Immensely. I mean, that's why you'll never hear me just bitch about Scientology. Like, it gave me so much confidence and self-respect. Like, it's hard to put into words, because that's that's pretty important in life, to have self-worth, to know a sense of accomplishment and pride and respect, and also the respect of one's peers. Like, you and I finished this program very early on. We spent the next months helping other people finish the program. Like, we were managing essentially hundreds of people. You're 24, I'm 15. We're managing hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And doing it well. Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
doing
it very well.
I actually, at one point, I got pulled aside by some management terminals there. And I had taken over, remember, I think it was Christine Owens was the senior intern who basically was a person in charge of all the people on internships. And she was in charge of our entire program as well. But I got pulled aside and said, okay, you're taking over for her so she can go back and run the internship. And I'm like, I'm doing what? For who? Because I was scared of her.
I remember actually getting busted at one point because I kept sneaking off to take naps in the bathroom, and people couldn't find me for long periods of time. And this is when we were, instead of just managing interns, we were like managing managers of interns.
Yeah.
This is when everyone was sent up to the crystal ballroom to do some special, cram session to get people through drills, and like,
oh my God, I forgot about that.
And I'm like fucking sleeping in the fucking bathroom of the Fort Harrison, right? The one with the good stalls where the doors went all the way down to the bottom. And I'd come back up and they're like, where have you been? I'm like, oh, I was at the Coachman. And they're like, fuck this. Wow. Like, I got busted.
I never pulled that. I never thought of it.
Yeah, you weren't devious enough. But it was a great time. I mean, I had a great time. There's people. There's a lot of people who want me to like stop saying that.
And you know what? That's ridiculous, because we stayed in as long. I mean, you obviously a lot longer than I did, and obviously other people have, like Mike Rinder and Leah, and a lot of people stayed in for a long time. There was obviously something there. There was obviously something that clicked for us to do something like that.
Right.
The last 5 years were pretty miserable, but
Indeed.
Again, this could be there's a whole other video on this one.
We're going to go. Like, for me, the experience I had when I went back to Philadelphia was so bad, it made me leave Scientology after 3 years.
Wow.
Like, I left Scientology for 2 years. I left staff. Again, I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but as fun, as good of a time as it was that I had at Flag, it was just as bad in Philadelphia.
Yeah. Wow. Well, let's get to that then. So we get what's referred to as fired. So before one is, for SEER members sent on mission, they are given their orders as to what they need to do when they get to their destination. And we were fired off all 168 orgs. I mean, there was over 700 people training in this group. It was huge.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, everyone left and everyone got home, which was pretty miraculous.
Some people didn't make it home. Some people blew right then.
Really?
Some SEER members even blew after they got to the airport.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah. Do you remember Dan? There was this one girl from the New York org, really funny, flamboyant, short, slightly.
Dior. Yeah.
Not Digna Delorby.
Okay.
The white lady. I'm gonna forget her name. Yeah, she made it back like a week and like blew. But I think that detracts from your point. Almost, yeah, you had like over 700 people going to the airport on the same day.
Hello, Tampa International.
And I think most of us stayed up all night the night before. It was like, that was heartbreaking. Leaving Flag was devastating for me. I did not want to leave.
That was hard. Yeah. All right, so we get home. Nobody knows what we've been doing.
Right. That's right, because the event hasn't even been broadcast in the orgs yet.
And we were told hush hush, and then we would be given a signal to go ahead and to talk.
Yeah.
Okay, so how many staff did you guys have?
Oh, geez. I mean, when we got back, maybe 20. Maybe 25, maybe at the most.
Okay, so you're for a Class 5 org semi-established.
Yeah, I mean, the org, it had a real ED who could really reg money. It had a supervisor who'd been there for 30 years, since it was a mission. Yeah, a relatively, for a Class 5 org at that time, a relatively established org.
Well, in comparison to mine, which was 5 staff.
There you go.
85% of them were part-time, and I mean part-time. Yeah, it was, when we got back, it was like, I mean, we're talking in the plane. We're like, okay, so are we going to stay full-time or are we going to be part-time? And like, we're like talking about this. I'm like, well, let's give it a year and see what happens. And we went back as full-time, which is
full-time versus full-time, or full-time versus part-time?
Yes, that's right. I got to explain that. Yeah, we were full-time. So the ideal scene for a Class 5 organization is to have a day-in foundation org. Basically, you're 9 to 6, and then you have a foundation. That's your day org. They work Monday to Friday, and then your foundation comes in from 6 to 10 or 9:30, really per the policy. And then they work Saturday and Sundays from 9 to 6. So that was optimum of what you wanted to do. And then for our type of orgs that didn't have the day-in foundation, we had full-time, which was 35 hours, and then there was full-time, which is basically from 9, well, in some cases, 8:30 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night.
Right.
Which was never 10 o'clock at night.
No.
All right, so we get back, and there's basically 5 staff, and my senior CS is leaving.
Really?
Yeah. He actually, when he got the flag, he wasn't even the senior CS.
Oh, wow.
They had to convince him to come down to represent the org.
And so then, wait, you fired home, and which senior CS was leaving? The one who was at flag or the one who was at home?
The one who was at home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But he had come to flag to represent the staff and get the full briefing as well.
Oh, when they brought all the EDs and the senior CSs down.
Yes.
Or was it?
I think just the senior CSs.
Just for the senior CS conference. And then you guys went home, and he's like, all right, I'm leaving.
Oh, they knew he was a public at that point. He was like on his leaving staff, quote unquote, leaving staff routing form.
Oh my God.
Like, here we go. This is going to be fun.
Wow. Wild.
Yes. All right. So that day that came where you guys actually briefed the staff, what was the reception?
Jesus, did that actually happen? Briefed the staff. Was that supposed to happen before the event or after the event?
Before the event.
Huh. I don't have a specific memory of that happening.
Okay.
We did have a pretty attentive staff. Like, the one thing about the Philly org is, like, almost all of the Philly public had at one point in time been staff. And so they were public, but they still acted and thought like staff. They didn't have this other than that they considered the org their org. Okay. In the way a staff member would. And so the staff that had been there had also been there for fucking ever. And so and me and Edward and Allie had a pretty good presence, and we had actually pretty good altitude with everyone. We didn't walk in being like, will you accept us? We walked in being like, move over, bitches, we're taking over. So as far as how the briefing went, we didn't have the kind of org atmosphere where people would do things like act dismissive or act like they didn't care. Like, it's pretty tight ship. So whatever the briefing was inconsequential. It was us just explaining it to them, and it just wasn't important. It wasn't a big deal. I mean, we were there to do what we were going to do, and whether these guys understood what the Golden Age Tech was about, we didn't really give a shit. We're like, what does the Treasury Secretary care about what the Golden Age of Tech is all about? I mean, like, if it has to do with you, you already know. And if it doesn't, if you don't, it probably doesn't. Kind of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, when we went back, though, we were really because it was a small staff. It was a very tight public. Most of the public, like in your case, most of the public had been staff in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
So we always got the stories of, well, when I was the supervisor, or when I was the ED, and it's like, well, you know what, you're not. Shut up. But
yeah, and actually, now that you're mentioning this, it also occurred to me that if you remember, there was a whole giant bulletin, a whole giant binder of bulletins from the office of the Senior CS International that was meant to be implemented throughout the entire org, the Senior CSN bulletins.
Right.
And it wasn't on us to get all those implemented in the org. That was on the Senior CS. And then there was the new era of management, which came out just after the Golden Age attack. So as supervisors, we took ownership for the course room, period. And the whole rest of the organization, we're like, you handle your shit and leave us the fuck alone. Right? Like we didn't even accept orders from the executive director. Like, I swear to God, the ED would come in and be like, okay, I need someone to hold reception during lunchtime. And we're like, why are you talking to us? We're the supervisors. You hold reception. We don't give a shit. That's not our job. You're not allowed to pull us off of our post.
Oh, no. We were kind of just the opposite, because, I mean, I would show up to the org and there was no one there on a Saturday.
Right.
Which was my Saturday and Sunday were my big days, and no one was there.
Well, that would happen with us. We would show up to the org and we'd have to be unlocking the door so the public could get in. But that's just because, but again, in your case, it might be because literally no one was going to be there that day. No other staff were going to be there that day. Or you were just the first to arrive.
No one came until about 11 o'clock in the morning. And now this wasn't all the time, but there was times where I would have to like go out, look out the window down at people, and have to send Danielle down to go get them. And it's really embarrassing. It's really embarrassing. And here we are. We come with all this training and all this, like, the events happened, and like everyone knows about everything that's going on, and they're like everyone's there's this buzz going on, and here we are, these highly trained, flag trained supervisors having to unlock the doors so they can go on course.
Right. I'll tell you, as messed up, when you look back on it and you're like, man, that was really messed up. We took so much pride in what we were doing, and we carried ourselves with such confidence that people just kind of fell in line and went along with it and were honestly inspired. Like, our public really, I mean, we'll get into this a little deeper, because the public that you see are the ones who bother to show up. You don't really see all the people who fell out of Scientology because of this. The public really kind of were happy to have people there who were like, oh, these guys actually care about the course room again. Like, oh, this is an org again.
Yeah.
And so I think I derailed something you were saying.
No, not at all. No, this is exactly what I want to talk about. It's like, what was the atmosphere like? Because within the first year of being back, Danielle and I were kind of the opinion leaders of the field.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Because we were so bright, so young, I'm not tooting horn, but like we were attractive. We were married. We were really like doing everything we possibly could do, despite the fact that one of us has to run downstairs and open the door on a Saturday morning to let people in on course. We were we were always there.
That's right. And that's what you said that jogged my memory, where I thought I had derailed your point, which is we took so much pride in ourselves and we took so much pride in our area. So yeah, the fact that I'd be opening the door and have to, and like you said, actually, and if there was no one else in the org, when we went upstairs, we'd have to lock the front door, because you can't just leave the front door unlocked if there's no one at reception or anything like that. Yeah. So just like you, we'd show up in the morning, unlock the door. If no other staff were there, you had to lock the door, go upstairs. But like, even during course, if there weren't a lot of people on course, I'd be running around, dusting windows, watering plants, organizing bookshelves, because to me, I was like, well, this is my space. And this isn't beneath me. Like, nothing was beneath me, because I just felt like I owned the whole space. Like, this is my fucking area. And so, I think that's also part of what people respected. Like, oh, these guys are really, not only do they know what they're doing, not only are they not taking any shit from anybody, but they have a lot of pride in this whole operation. And that was certainly a result of how we were built up on the out-of-org trainee program. And I feel like, not to diverge too much here, but I do hear a lot of people's stories from the Sea Org, and particularly growing up in the Sea Org, where their experience was more led to them having low self-esteem because they're always treated so shitty and talked down to and dismissed and whatnot. And I've come to understand that, like I've said it, many times, I've said that in so many ways I dodged so many bullets in my Scientology experience, and I think this is one of them. Whereas the out-of-org training program was such a unique period of time that my baptism of fire in Scientology was a period of time where I was actually being built up and told how wonderful I was. Whereas a lot of other people, their baptism of fire in Scientology or the Sea Org is they're kind of being treated like shit and talked down to with heavy ethics and all this stuff, and that they were just a piece of shit. So that's why I tend to like really want to emphasize how important this period was, and maybe that's because I felt like it was just so important for me personally. Yeah, we just got. Did you feel that while you were flagged? Did you feel that how you were being built up? Like, you know how I'm saying it? Did it feel that way to you?
Oh, my ego was completely stroked all the time.
I mean, even by David Miscavige himself.
Well, but you know, the other thing too is that you and I were both, minus the metering course, we're both finishing courses on time.
Right.
We were leaders within our group. We were spot on about things. And I, from what I was told, was a really good supervisor. I was really good at my job as well.
Right.
So that, you know, that had a lot to do with it as well. Okay. So you're home, you have the event, you're on, you know, we've talked a little bit about like a little bit of our experiences of being, you know, within the staff. What was the reception to the why with the older Scientologists, meaning not old as in age-wise, but the people that have been around for a while, and the trained auditors that were told that if they didn't get done within a year or 2 years, their certs are being stripped?
Okay, so this is interesting. Because Department 11, which is the department of the Scientology Organizing Board where the course room is located, does not deal with field auditors. I have to say that the stuff like that was going on was completely outside of our view. And we weren't really exposed to the collateral damage, the massive collateral damage that was happening in the Scientology world by this introduction of the golden age of tech, where every auditor in the world was told, yeah, you don't know how to audit. And if you don't redo all of your training in the next year, we're pulling all of your certificates you've ever earned. And in Philadelphia, even as I sit here and think about it, I swear there was only one auditor in the entire Philadelphia field.
Right.
And she came in and started her training. She came in and started redoing her training. And so we didn't have this huge drama going on with public objecting to the whole thing. We just honestly didn't. And if it was happening, we just weren't exposed to it. We weren't the ones having to get these people in to do that. How did it happen with you guys?
Just the opposite. I was very intimately involved with getting people back on the bridge, back into the course room, obviously. I mean, it was, for the most part, it was myself, Danielle, my executive director, which I don't need to mention her name, and like, I think a Dianetics auditor who was like one of those awesome Dianetic auditors. And we were pretty much the only full-time people. So
how, like, what list were you pulling from?
Kind of just the people that showed up to the event type of list. These are the, you know, we had about 220 people show up to the event. I think that was one of the biggest events we ever had.
Okay.
But you know, remember my mom had been on staff. So and also Danielle grew up in Scientology. So kind of had in with most of the people that are around during the 70s and 80s. So it was pretty, you know, it's pretty easy for me to get on the phone with somebody and say, hey, it's Jeff, you know, and I over the years, and still to this day, I've actually established relationships, or had established relationships that I'm still holding on to with people that saw this and were like, what? Wait, what do you mean? Like the blind leading the blind? What What are these drills? What? And everyone that any objection anyone ever had to me was, where's the LRH reference on this? Because they're really, except for
You're talking on basic qual.
Talking to basic well, yes. There really was no reference on doing this. And a lot, I had, okay, we had an active bodies in the shop of about 50 people a week when I got there, 45, 50 people. We probably had an active field of about 100 people on top of that. And truly active about 40, probably about 30. So I had about 30 people to recover for the most part. And a lot of them I got in, a lot of them I got through the student hat or the study certainty course. Someone went onto the, and only a few went onto the ProTR's course. But for most people, they were like, okay, this is really stupid. And I don't feel like it's fair that you're going to sit there and tell me I don't know how to study because I can't tell you the three barriers to study and all of their manifestations.
Right.
I had a lot to deal with, and I kept, to say my TRs, training routines, my TRs in with people, and was very understanding and was able to get people to keep going just by sheer charm. But we lost a fair amount of, retrospectively or relatively, a lot of people we lost at that point.
And how do you lose them? What happens? Meaning yeah.
Well, ahead. Immediately, our 5 top auditors that were either on staff or in or field auditors stopped auditing. They stopped coming into the organ auditing, and they stopped auditing in general.
So it's not like they necessarily are resigning from Scientology, but they're like, okay, I cannot keep going, and I'm not going to do what you want me to do.
Correct.
Did those guys end up leaving Scientology?
All of them have left Scientology. And
Jesus.
Yeah, they've all left. One actually just finished OT7 and through Alt Scientology or Free Zone or whatever.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. And funny thing is that we haven't really all talked about it, but I'm still friends with these people because they were all friends with my mom.
So check this out. A moment ago, we were sort of trying to point out how it didn't make any sense for Miscavige to either do or think he had the credentials to start this whole investigation and this whole movement. But I just was reminded that the real goal here was to get rid of people who were more loyal to LRH than to him.
Huh. And the ones who left were the most loyal to LRH.
Yeah, because they're the ones who are like, where's the fucking reference? And if someone said that to me, I would have practically slapped them in the face. The reference is talking to basic qual. That's the reference.
For me, though, it was like, because, I had no ground to stand on. And that's, I meant to get into that, like, with you earlier, but I had no ground to stand on as a Scientologist. Nobody knew me. I just kind of went into the TTC and went to flag. And they're like, Jeff, who are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm Barbara Manning's son. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay.
Oh, Lil Jeffy.
Yeah. But I didn't have much of a ground to stand on. And, I've always had to try to take a very fair, what I think I learned the most as soon as I got home was that my arrogance needed to be checked a little bit.
Yeah, we didn't learn that lesson in Philadelphia.
Well, but this is good that we're talking because I had a little bit more involvement with the org because I didn't have anything to do between 9 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night or till 7 o'clock when course started. I had no students.
Oh, the only students came in at night?
Yes, I had no students. Every once in a while, I had afternoon students.
Had at least one person in the course room.
Right. No, not until about 3:30. I can still name them, but I had 3 students that would sporadically come in, Tuesdays and Thursdays or Monday, Wednesday, Fridays or something like that. But yeah, I had a lot of free time on my hands, and it took me a little while to check myself. That being said, and you started bringing this up, and where did it hit you that maybe something was wrong with what we were doing, with what we had learned, or where your ego kind of had to leave a bit, had to be kind of checked a little bit, and started to take a look at what's going on, what we're doing, and
until the day I left the Sea Org in May 2006, I never learned that lesson.
Okay.
Never. In fact, even in the Sea Org, my continued loyalty to the concept of the Golden Age tech, my continued loyalty to Miscavige's vision and intention, my strict adherence to the RTC network bulletins saved my ass in the Sea Org so many times because the RTC reps loved me because they knew I loved them. And they knew I loved David Miscavige. I mean, the whole time I was in the Sea Org, I never once thought anything David Miscavige was doing or saying was anything other than perfectly correct. And it saved my bacon.
Okay.
And I never got rid of that. I guess I call it a mental block, where it never occurred to me how many people had just dropped out of Scientology because of the Golden Age attack. And even if I'm trying to put myself in my shoes back then, even if that had occurred to me, it wouldn't have fazed me. I would have been like, well, okay, we don't have any use for non-standard auditors anyway.
Wow.
Honestly, it was like
I appreciate that. I appreciate
in my videos, when I talk about having the frame of mind of the Hitler Youth, that's why I say that. And it's not even like I had to do backflips to figure out how what Miscavige was doing made sense. It made perfect sense to me. The HCO policy letter, the structure of organization, what is policy? It's a long ass policy letter. It's like 12, 16 pages.
Yeah.
To me, if you read that policy letter combined with talk on a basic qual, everything Miscavige did was genius. That's how I was processing it. That policy letter gives you so much leeway because it allows for the idea of canceling stale dated policy.
Well, maybe that's where it answers this question, because where I started to, I don't want to ever say waver, but I never actually liked David Miscavige. I didn't trust him. Something about him just really didn't, I felt very validated by him for what I was doing, but I was still left with some skepticism.
Left flag?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because I didn't, again, I had no basis. I didn't have that basis of LRH.
Right.
I only had the policies and what was said. You have technical degrades, KSW, which are your first two things you read is Keeping Scientology Working, series number 1, and then technical degrades.
Right.
When you mentioned the Inspector General Network bulletins, and I think the 3 that carried on for the Golden Age attack was Inspector General Network bulletin number 21, 22, and 23.
Okay.
Does that ring a bell?
Well, 22 and 25, IG Network bulletin 22. 22 rings a bell. 25 rings a bell, and I feel like I'm blanking on the other one.
Yeah, 25 had to do with the Golden Age tech for OTs in 1998.
Okay.
I think
22 was the main one.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes. So I had one of my staff members, a TTC member, was reading over, we'll say, one of the 3 or 2 or whatever. And there's a very specific quote where he says, well, that the most recent policy is the one that you're supposed to follow.
Yes. Where does that come from?
Okay. Well, here's where I started to even further kind of fray away from the David Miscavige bandwagon.
It was one of Miscavige's bulletins where he said that.
Yeah.
The age-old policy that the most recent reference takes precedence.
Yes, exactly. Okay.
Yes.
So I had said to a staff member that, because she was claiming that this was confusing, something in this bulletin was confusing, and was lowering it down in course. I'm like, yeah, that's one does not lead to the other. And anyways, I'm holding on to this because I have a question I need to ask before letting anyone read this. Because to me, this was not LRH. This was David Miscavige. LRH was the one we follow, no one else. And that got reported. I got written, knowledge report got written up on Jeff because he wasn't allowing the student to read IG Network Bulletin number 20, whatever.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting, at this time, now we're about two or 3 years in, we have an LRH communicator who is basically L. Ron Hubbard's representative in the organization. She gets a scathing, because this guy ran up to RTC, a scathing telex saying, find out his crimes. And I'm like, I said to her, I'm like, I looked at her, I'm like holding it going, this is not L. Ron Hubbard. I can do whatever the hell I want with this. I'm like, and plus he states something in here that I just wanted, and I had written to RTC 5 times. What's the reference on this, by the way? Very friendly, not accusative.
They wouldn't give it to you.
Never gave it to me because it didn't exist.
You know, I'm so glad you're bringing this up, because over the last many years, it has come up where I looked for that policy and I could have sworn I knew where it was. And I kept looking through the policy letters where I thought that quote was, and I couldn't find it. And I had totally forgotten. It was just something Miscavige said in one of his bulletins, that this was an age-old, the age-old policy, or the age-old. He didn't give a reference for that quote. He just said, like, the age-old tradition that the most recent policy letter takes precedence.
Hence, that's verbal tech. That's verbal tech. That was off policy to me. Boop,
right.
It's gone. I pulled it. I wouldn't let anyone read it.
Well, speaking of verbal tech, this just is going to prove your point, and it's another thing from that bulletin. In that same IG Network bulletin, there's a quote where he quotes some reference, and he says, I'm not going to interpret this policy letter for you. Read it for yourself. But what you must understand is, boom! And then he fucking interprets it. And now you apparently would have read that bulletin and go, or that thing from Miscavige and gone, well, that's off policy. What I took away from it, and this is where I go, that Hitler Youth mentality. I read that very carefully and I said, oh shit. The lesson to be learned here is that if you say you're not going to interpret something, then you can follow it with an interpretation and you won't get in trouble.
No,
like, it wasn't in my being to go, Miscavige is violating policy, because I'm like, Miscavige is the one in charge. Hubbard's not here. So whatever Miscavige says is okay is okay. Like, that's all how I was processing information.
Yeah. And you know what? You are right, because if you just followed along with what he said, you were right, because
you're okay. You're safe.
Yeah, you're safe.
You agree with the man on top. You're safe.
I remember even once, not to go backwards, but I remember one time in the course room, while we were supervising the supervisors, I was told to go, and I had to go through, and I had 35 students in the course room, to go through and set a 15-minute target for each student. I did the math on how long that would take. I looked at the RTC rep and I'm sorry, but that's completely off policy based on supervisor minutes and students' hours. You know, these are very simple. You know, I showed her the reference on it, and I'm like, and I pulled her aside. I didn't do this in front of anyone. And I'm like, this is the policy. I'm like, I can't do that. That's just a waste of time. And she's like, well, you got to be a product officer. I'm like, it doesn't say anywhere in the supervisor's code that I'm a product officer. My job is to get them to understand the material so that they can use it. That's my job.
What did she say? How did that end?
She smiled at me and was like, okay, good. She had nothing to say because I wasn't being disrespectful to her, because I'm like, you know, you're RTC, you're supposed to hold up the technical standards, and here's the technical standard for you to read.
Do you remember which RTC rep it was?
You know what? If we had a picture of her, what I remember is a strawberry blonde, slightly curly, 5'4".
Oh, Melanie Peeler.
Good. None of them had names. They were sir. And I never flirted with any of them either, ever.
No, you can't do that.
No.
They were hot
though. Never flirted with any of them. You can't
even bring yourself to admit it now.
All the time.
Being sarcastic.
Yeah, no, not at all. Okay, so all right, so
innocent back. I was too young and innocent back then.
Yeah, I wasn't. Okay, so why did you leave staff? What was the break? Okay, yeah, what was the breaking point for you?
Okay, so I went back, and it gets very personal because I went back with Edward and Allie, and I don't know if you remember Edward,
Oh,
but
yeah, I do.
he's a
Absolutely.
snide,
Mhm.
slimy motherfucker. Okay. And Allie was his little BFF. Never mind the fact that Allie was my stepsister. And at this time, you would have been crazy not to think that Edward was just closeted gay.
Yeah, I thought that
And
as well. Yeah.
everyone thought Edward was gay. And he was just Allie's little gay BFF, but closeted gay BFF. But he was always so snide and trying to talk badly about people. Okay, except lo and behold, Edward's fucking mother becomes the executive director.
Yes.
She's like staff status 1. And his father becomes the LRH communicator. So the org became the DiMartino Clubhouse. And Aaron, who was the one actually trying to forward command and tension, was just being fucking needled and prodded and reported all over the place. And it gets even worse, especially when you remember how tight-knit we were all supposed to be as a team. Where Edward's mom, and you know, Edward's mom and dad had sold a business, so they had some money, and they lived in an apartment right downtown, 2 blocks away from the org. And Edward had his little apartment down the hall from his mommy and daddy. Whereas my mom's still at Flag. Me and Colin are living with a guardian in South Jersey, taking a bus 45 minutes each way to and from the org, walking 25 minutes to the bus stop from home and then back home, 9 in the morning, 10 o'clock at night. So in other words, it requires a lot more of me and us at that time, but I'll just talk about me, to be there than it did them. And then I find out Edward's doing stuff like only sending students to go buy books that are needed on their check sheet when I'm not there so that he can get all the book commissions. Instead of me sitting here going, well, shouldn't we just all be splitting all the commissions? Like, we're all here in the same terms, right? Like, so that kind of shit, after enough time, just infuriated me. Plus, you had this thing where my brother had pretty much left staff and was kind of living his non-Scientology life, in my eyes, having a good time. But in his eyes, he was struggling, and I was the one doing the noble work. And so anyway, it just got to the point where I just literally did not want to be at the org anymore. It had nothing to do, again, this is how compartmentalized my mind was. Had nothing to do with Scientology being bad, or the Golden Age of Tech being bad, or LRH being bad, or management tech being bad, or the tech itself being bad, or David Miscavige being bad. Nothing. It was just these fuckers in Philadelphia who was making life so difficult that I just did not give a fuck anymore. It literally did just beat the giving a fuck out of me. And so I got on a bus. I just literally didn't come in one day. And for a short amount of time, I got a job at the Kinder Care Center down the street from where I lived. And I was Mr. Aaron, the teacher, who for some reason was being paid more. All the women there, right? That didn't go over well. And then I got on a bus, and I took a 3-day bus ride to LA, and I moved to LA when a couple months before I turned 18.
Okay.
So let's do the math there. If I went back to Philadelphia in May '96, that's when our contract starts ticking.
Right.
And then I moved to LA like 2 months before my 18th birthday. So May '96, I'm 15. Yeah, so almost 3 years. Almost 3 years when I left. And then I was, so that answers that question of why did I leave? I literally just was like, fuck you guys. I've got better things I could be doing. So I moved to LA for 2 years. Have fun, whatever. Live on my own, do my thing. And I had this $100,000 freeloader debt. So I couldn't do any Scientology, even though I still considered myself a Scientologist. And eventually I just got to the point where I couldn't see what the future looked like. It literally is just that long and the short of it. I was like, yeah, I don't, because remember, this whole time I still consider myself a Scientologist, so it's not like I was trying to establish my non-Scientology life. It just got to the point where I was like, yeah, I don't know what the future is going to look like if I don't go back and finish my contract. So I went back and I finished the last 2 years of my contract, and it was just as terrible. But I was like, fuck you guys, the time's ticking. I don't give a shit about you motherfuckers. But right when my contract was going to expire and I was going to move back to LA and live my normal public Scientology life, two people came to Philadelphia, two people I'd known and grown up with who went off and joined the Sea Org, one of which became LRH Com International. She came back to Philadelphia for a family wedding, and basically la-da-dee, la-da-da, got me replaced, and I joined the Sea Org instead of right when my contract was about to expire, like 1 or 2 months before my 5-year contract was going to be up. I joined the Sea Org.
Wow.
Now the thing there is, remember when I never wanted to leave Flag in the first place. So when I went back to Philadelphia, my attitude was like, hey bitches, I'm going to hire a replacement, replace myself, and I'm out of here. And I could never get that done. And I think the fact that I couldn't get that done combined, well, because you couldn't recruit someone. I mean, you had success recruiting people. We couldn't recruit people and make them into supervisors. They would always fail and leave, and it just wasn't working. We literally did not recruit a supervisor the entire time we were there.
Yeah, we were supposed to basically replace ourselves as per the senior status in bulletins. We were supposed to get at least 2 people in for each one of the posts that we were covering.
And then I can't remember why though. Were we supposed to go back to Flag for professor training or something? Like what?
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. I guess so. Yeah, I wasn't going back. No.
We couldn't recruit anyone to save our lives. And so anyway, that's why I left. They just made it a terrible, terrible experience, just trying to treat you like shit. And again, the only reason I lasted as long as I did is because I was like, you have nothing on me. I don't answer to you. I answer to David Miscavige. And anytime, and not literally, like it's not like I was just walking around being a dick to the executive director every day, aside from the fact that she was being a bitch to me all the time. Is that if anyone said or did anything that minimized what I was doing or degraded what I was doing or cut across what I was doing, I would write them up to RTC. And they were listening. Like they were listening,
Yeah.
So that's that. But you never did actually leave staff until the very, very end when you pretty much left Scientology.
Yeah, I actually got to re-sign my contract, I think 4 different times.
Woo!
Because I did 2.5 year. 5 years was good enough. That's what I was required to do. I'll do 2.5 year stints. And then I took over as the executive director in 2001, right before 9/11, actually. And held that post again on and off until about 2006. And in fact, when I got declared type A, which is being connected to somebody who's antagonistic to Scientology, PTS type A, I still had 1 more day left on my contract. And I remember looking at Dan Brown and saying, could you give me 1 more day? Just 1 more day.
That's
He's
great.
like, no, this declare goes in right now. And I looked at him and said, it's off policy to declare a staff member PTS type A. You were supposed to handle me. You cannot do this, which is per policy. I don't remember. Ethics, Justice, the Dynamics. Actually, I think it's the policy on it. But yeah, I mean, it was, I held out to like, give me the fucking 24 hours, man.
Wow, that's wild.
Okay, so that's okay. So we have the golden age of tech. Really, my biggest thing as a supervisor was getting my guys through the course. I ended up making some auditors. In fact, 3 of them ended up joining staff during the whole evolution for the Ideal org back in 2003, 2004.
Yeah.
So now I had also gotten some auditing from some of these Golden Age Tech trained auditors, prior to which I'd actually had auditing by someone who was trained by LRH. And it was a Class 8 in Toronto, because we didn't have any auditors for a number of years. So
Oh.
believe it or not, there really was a huge. That's when I saw, like, I remember we got like my class 8 auditor was like, okay, you thinking about something there? I'm like, dirty needle. I'm like, yeah, your beingness in TR is so much better than anything I'm training right now.
Wow.
That was kind of a point of, for me, again, for me, it was a lot of little things. I don't know if you can see this, but my little puppy's right behind me, right here.
Yeah, I can
My
see
little
it.
girl. Iso, come here, baby. Yeah, so that was, there was a lot of little things. But it's interesting that we talk about this because I was more on LRH's team and you were more on David Miscavige's team.
Totally. And how did you guys not get nuked? Because you were out there in Buffalo where no one gave a shit about you being against Miscavige. I don't know.
I was a really good soup. I was one of the opinion leaders in the field.
How did that thing wash out, though, where you wouldn't let the students read IG-22?
I never heard anything back. After I told my LRH comm what I had said, I never heard anything back.
But did you let your students read IG-22?
After a couple of weeks, I like, all right, fine, read it. But I'm like, I highlighted it. I had like 6 versions of it, and I highlighted it, and I said,
yeah,
I don't know what the reference is on this.
Oh, your LRH comm must have been a giant pussy.
I was a hothead, or I am a hothead, but a lot less now. But I didn't let anyone. There were certain things that people could not fuck with me on, and that was one of them. This is my course room. This is my domain. Do not walk into my course room unless someone is dead.
Right.
And even then, wait until break.
So our executive director. Now, okay, I'm thinking of 2 different time periods here because there was the time period before I went to LA for 2 years and the time period after I came back. And it was a different ED when I came back. And she had been a previously trained Golden Age of Tech soup. And at I'm sorry. Pre-GAT trained soup.
Okay.
Meaning she was not GAT. Okay. And, I guess she wanted to, as the ED, impose her presence and authority. And she would come into the course room and want to, like, spot check students. I'd be like, what are you doing?
Oh, no.
I'd be like, what are you doing? I'm been a course supervisor 20 years. Don't care.
Your shirt is not on the wall with a Golden Age of Tech
Here's the program. And this is funny because at this point, I'm showing her something that's not written by LRH. It's a senior CSN bulletin, which was written by David Miscavige, let's be honest, or authorized by him. And it said, you're not allowed to soup, right? I mean, so just like you, I was like, no. Like if they would come in front of the course room and stand there, I'd be like, can I help you? Why are you here? I know what I'm doing. Why the fuck are you here?
Yeah. I actually kicked SO members out of my course room.
Yeah. Oh, dude, Herb from ASHO would want to come in and do the I'd be like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, we're going to come in. We're going to supervise. I'm like, why? We trained at Flag together, dude. What, you're better than me? Well, this program says, well, I'm supposed to come in and do this. I'm like, yeah, LRH wrote that program before you and I trained at Flag together, dickhead. Right? And I gave him so much shit. And then he did his thing anyway. And at the end, he was like, this is the first org I've ever been in where it actually felt like a real academy. I was like, yeah, thanks for the thumbs up, cocksucker. Get out of here.
Yes, so the people that are watching, we did walk away with a wee bit of little arrogance. Because that was instilled in us. We were the elite.
The best of the best.
The best of the best.
No one had ever been as bestest.
And in fact, actually, I was so well respected in the East US that I actually supervised the CLO course room for a little while, for a couple hours here and there.
Yeah.
So Continental Liaison Office in New York.
How about this for some balls?
48th Street, yes.
At one point during my 2-year hiatus in Los Angeles, I was convinced to start the EPF at CCNs. And this lasted for like a week. Before they're like, you're a freeloader. And I'm like, you knew that before I started. I was on the EPF. We show up for course room. The supervisor's late. So I pick up the roll book and I call roll. Everyone's like, are you allowed to do that? I'm like, I just did it.
So therefore, I am. Okay, so that's that time period. I actually have a couple quick questions for you.
Yeah.
During the period for our ideal org, and we'd actually talked about this in our video from I think it was Friday or Saturday. We did a video. The time period when the org was going through its transformation into the ideal org, we had so right that particular week, right before the ceremony, Dave Miscavige was there, and we got shown a video called the South African Briefing.
About the pay system?
Yes.
Okay.
But the pay system. Now, and I bring that up because we actually were the third org. It was San Francisco, Joburg, and then Buffalo. We were number 3. But I was also told that there was a Joburg technical briefing as well, which discussed which I've always in my head referred to, the quickening of the grades.
The grades, yeah.
Yes.
So I remember that.
Okay. Did you see the briefing?
I was in the Sea Org at the time.
Right. Obviously.
And I do remember seeing the briefing. And it had, I do remember seeing the briefing. And it's funny because you never saw it.
I heard rumors mainly from Danielle because she was she'd gone back at one point after coming back from senior CS training, had gone back, and we talked about it when she'd come back. Yeah, so it's probably 2005.
It had to do with this subject of the objectives had never been properly done, and let them co-audit on objectives. Like the objectives were sort of quickied, and then people took forever on the grades. But the objectives, you should spend hundreds of hours on the objectives and then fly through the grades. And again, I don't know how he decided that if you spend hundreds and hundreds of hours on objectives, that now you could do the grade quad process first and then run all the other processes until it seemed like the TA had run out of it. But again, he's the one that started the whole evolution of compiling every process Hubbard had ever fucking said in any lecture ever, and putting them on a grades process checklist. He's the one that created the giant, massive, expanded grades process checklist in the first place.
Right.
They didn't used to be that big. They got that big under Miscavige. And then he discovers this is all fucked up. Well, what the fuck were you doing in the first place? Like,
Yeah. And we go back now. I did this kind of on purpose, but the whole point of RTC was to keep the standards of Scientology, the tech, ethics, and admin, to uphold the technical standards. And now we're talking about like 2006, 2007. We're getting into the golden age of Tech 2 at this point.
Before that, actually. Well,
okay.
I mean, here's what's funny. I don't want to get you off your point. The GAT2 wasn't released until like 2008, but the trainees were sent down there for the first time in like 2003.
Okay.
They actually canceled the release of GAT2 for a long time. They like suspended the training evolution. They actually canceled the training evolution. Like something happened.
I remember from talking with Danielle about this now. It was they were piloting this down at Flag for like 8 years, and which was killing Tampa because they were pulling in all the Tampa PCs to run grades, and they were pulling and from the rest of the world as well.
What were they piloting? I'm not even sure I still ever knew.
New grades checklists.
Oh, I knew about the grades checklist stuff.
Yeah,
it was piloted at Flag for about 10 years.
Right.
Yeah.
But like again, like why would you have to pilot if you figured everything out? Like it's as simple as changing a tire.
Yeah.
You jack up the car first. Or no, you loosen up the lug nuts first. You jack up the car, pull the lug nuts off, pull the tire off, put the tire on, tighten everything up, drop the car, drop the jack, and then tighten up the lug nuts, and then you move. It's simple. That's how you're supposed to. That's how you change a tire. What do we need to do? What do we need to pilot something for 10 years? How much money was lost and then gained by Flag type of thing?
Well, here's the thing. Again, it's like obviously on its face it doesn't make sense, but then you realize it's not a pilot if you're doing it the top org in the world and charging people for it. It's a pilot if you're doing it on staff members. right?
Yeah.
It'd be like saying Apple's piloting a new iOS on its iPhone 10 launch.
Yeah.
No.
That's called beta.
Right. So it's like, that's not a pilot. That's a justification for changing tech. Where you don't pilot something at the top tech org in the world for a decade and not let the orgs do it. Like, so that's one of these things. It's obviously doesn't make sense, so it's obviously not the reason. It obviously doesn't make sense for Miscavige to wake up one day and decide that he's the only one that knows what a floating needle is, and then he redefines it, and then he says everyone's miscalling FNs, and that leads to an investigation that completely rehauls auditor training. No, the explanation is he had to get rid of people that were more loyal to LRH than him.
Right.
The whole thing of piloting it at Flag was an excuse to get people to Flag because there's better regs at Flag than anywhere else. Public are wasted in the orgs because no one's regging them properly in the orgs. So you suck them up to Flag with this promise of faster grades, and you can bleed them dry for IAS money. And it then serves as blackmail to the orgs to get them to send out-org trainees there. I think he knew that orgs didn't want to send out-org trainees to Flag anymore. And it was like, okay, we're going to take away your ability to, we're going to undercut your ability to deliver the grades by offering faster, cheaper grades at Flag. No one's going to want to do their grades at your org. So everyone's coming to Flag to do their grades because they're being promised by the regs that they're going to do new fast grades. And then you tell the orgs, you're basically not getting your public back until you send out-org trainees here to learn how to audit the new grades. Like,
but here's the sick thing. It's like point number 2 of Tech D grades.
He doesn't give a shit.
Like, but it's so odd. But whatever. I mean,
no, you're right. It's so obvious.
It's so obvious.
But at this point, he had already created an echelon of Scientology staff who was more
public as well,
who were more loyal to him,
right,
than they were to the concept of LRH.
Right. I'm still surprised that Tom Cruise did not that he didn't. He just turned around and looked at David and saluted David, not LRH. I was really, that the IS in 2003, 2004.
Tom just does not strike me as a very bright guy.
We're not going to talk about Tom Cruise right now.
No, I'm just saying he strikes me as a workhorse who, if he has his sights set on something, he will do anything to accomplish that. But it's kind of like you can just point him. Miscavige can just point him in a direction and say, "This is what it is," and he'd be like, "That's great, sir. You're wonderful."
Salute.
Right.
Okay, so my last question, or we'll round this all up. And I've been dying to ask somebody this. Did the Tech Dictionary and Admin Dictionary ever get released?
The new one? No.
Are you fucking kidding me?
I mean, unless it got released with GAT2 and I just don't know about it.
Okay, but even up to your point in time.
Yeah, no.
The copyright of 1977 with board technical bulletins and board policy letters
was still the original. In fact, so what had happened, and maybe you don't know this, Flag, of course, had its pilot dictionary.
For when we had one, we were there.
Right. Well, that pilot dictionary just kept getting bigger and bigger.
Right.
And then when I got to ASHO, they had one. Oh, actually, this might be the answer to your question. There is, I eventually, when I got to ASHO, I photocopied the fucking thing and sent it to Philadelphia. And I said, here you go. It's been 10, 15 years. Take the fucking dictionary. So the church, at one of the events, they released basically a hard to find words thing. And this was sort of because for just normal tech and admin words, those old dictionaries were pretty much fine. But the pilot dictionary had like everything.
Right.
So instead of re-releasing the tech and admin dictionary, they actually released a hard copy version. It was shipped out to every org. It sits on top of a shelf, and it's got the unbreakable papers and the special binding. Hard to find words and phrases. Right. Of like everything LRH ever said that doesn't have a normal definition in a normal dictionary, or that you've got to find like some crazy dictionary to find something that makes sense. That's what they released. If they actually released any new versions of the tech and admin dictionaries, I'm not aware.
Wow. I actually submitted one definition of one word to that hard to find dictionary.
Is that right?
Yeah. Was it RTRC, religious technology or religious?
RTRC. LRH Technical Research and Compilations.
Technical Research and Compilation, yeah. The definition of impulse, which was in this very obscure dictionary from the 1920s that I found.
Right.
So I guess really kind of in conclusion here, what we've really kind of brought up was that by around 1995, Scientology publicly through David Miscavige just really started veering towards David Miscavige, was with LRH as a flagpole to salute to, in a sense.
That's a very good way of putting it. I mean, even here's where it gets crazy. And in retrospect, it's hard for me to understand how the people that were there at the time, like Mr. Nunn, Mr. Bernadette Nunn, well, she's a woman, Bernadette Nunn, and Mr. Paul Schobel, who seemed to be so loyal to the concept of LRH, how they stood by and watched Class 12 auditors who'd been auditing under LRH for who knows how long. They've been auditing for decades. Be told they did not know what a floating needle was. They did not know what an instant read was. And literally, you know, where we're like, you miscalled 30 FNs in a session and making it sound like it was on purpose. And it's like, no, you guys just disagree on what a floating needle is.
Yeah.
And like being RPF'd and like Class 12 auditors literally being taken out of the chair and never put back in because they don't agree with David Miscavige on what proper metering is.
Right.
At the time, that did not strike me as odd. In retrospect, it's insanity.
Yeah. You know what? Actually, that reminded me of something, and I'm going completely off to the left here right now, or the right, whichever you wanted to say. Whichever way you lean politically. No. You and Chris Shelton had done a video, and you were talking about people going into the RPF. And a question had come up, and I want your mom to verify this. A question had come up, had a public ever been submitted to the RPF?
Oh, a public? No. Well, but if that happens, the public is made to join the Sea Org so that they can be put on the RPF.
Okay, but what I remember
that has happened.
Okay, okay. Because I remember from the interview you guys did, you said no public had ever been in the RPF.
Well, I mean, public don't do the RPF. You'd have to join the Sea Org and do the RPF.
Right, but then made to. But it was a staff member ever made to join? Was a public or a staff member, Class 5 staff member, ever put into the RPF?
A public was given the ultimatum of you're either going to be declared or you can join the Sea Org and do the RPF.
Okay, because what had come up from my memory from our training was the senior CF in Hamburg.
Jürgen Denker.
Yes. Okay. Good. All right. It just popped into my head.
And that's a staff member. But you were asking specifically, had that ever happened to a public? And the answer is still yes.
Okay. All right. Good. Good chat.
Yeah.
This was a big time period for both of us. From what obviously from what I can see with you, and I can see obviously from myself, a catapulting time in our lives. I would love to actually hear from other Class 5 staff members that went through the same training program we did.
Well, I had asked Nora Crest if she actually wanted to join us on this chat in a three-way chat, but when I asked her, I thought you guys knew each other, and that would make the call a lot of fun. She doesn't remember you from Flag. Do you remember?
She will. Yeah, she's following me on Twitter now. But yeah, I absolutely remember Nora.
Oh, okay.
Her and Danielle were really good friends, actually.
I mean, some people are just memorable, and you look like every other white guy out there.
Yeah, I have that going for me, don't I?
Just to wrap up real quick, in what ways, in your view, how and why was the golden age of tech, kind of the beginning of the end for the Church of Scientology?
From the Buffalo respect.
Well, do you feel that this whole golden age of tech effort that Miscavige did kind of started a huge period of decline for Scientology? Is that how you feel?
Absolutely. And
so why? Like, why did this cause a decline, long-term decline in Scientology?
Okay, if you take a Class 5 org really is made up if it's public. That's the driving force of a Class 5 org, because and I mean public, I mean the hardcore guys, the guys that have been around since ad infinitum, right from the beginning. If you tell them that they're wrong and invalidate them for all the time that they've put into the org, all the renovations they've done, the money they've contributed, the money they've helped raise, the people they've brought in, and been disappointed because the org didn't deliver, you're going to turn around and tell them that you trained as an auditor, which a lot of the field in Buffalo did in the 70s.
Yeah.
There's a whole thing I could talk about with that time period for Buffalo. If you tell them that they don't know what they're doing, don't know what they're talking about, and this new brand of technology is what we're talking about, and these guys are LRH loyalists, they're going to walk away.
Right.
And I really think it's, we probably would go into any org right now and stop everyone at an event and survey them and ask them, when did you get into Scientology? I bet you it's after 1996. Right. The majority.
The vast majority. When we got back to our orgs in 1996, you left post as you walked away from Scientology effectively. That doesn't do the story justice. In what year?
2006, I moved to New York.
Come 2006, 10 years after you fired back home, did you believe Scientology was expanding in 2006?
Absolutely not. There's
no
way.
It wasn't? I still believed it was. I believed it was.
No, there's no way. There's no way those events, those numbers. I'm not a mathematician, but I know math well enough to know that those figures are, as we brought up in the previous video about the double speak from 1984 of, this was at 2000, we dropped it down to 1,000, but then we brought it back up to 2000 again, and look how much expansion we've had.
So you already thought that you were being lied to at the events?
Absolutely. No doubt.
I didn't.
Never said anything.
Yeah.
But I'm listening to a broken record right now.
And is that because you knew that everywhere else couldn't be doing so much better than Buffalo, or did you have some reason to believe? What made you think that what you were running into Buffalo, everyone else was running into as well?
Arrogant answer. There's no way I could be that good of a supervisor and not having the org expand. And then having to watch now, okay, so now it's 2005, 2006. We have 2 supervisors in the courtroom. I have 5 auditors. I have a flag trained senior CS, and I still can't make any money.
Right. Right.
How, and I don't even want to get into, well, we will, if you want to sometime, I'll talk about being an ED, but I don't even want to get into the insanity that was created in my mind.
Right.
That was the most frustrating and most difficult time between 2003 to 2006 in my life. Yeah.
I mean, I must just be a sucker, man. I would sit at the international events and I'd be like, oh,
hey, well,
is wonderful.
Okay, back to 1984. It's hate hour or 5 minutes of hate. You're the one screaming and yelling at Goldberg and throwing things at the screen, at the telescreens and that sort of thing.
That's right.
I'm Winston going, yeah, whatever.
It's funny. If you remember the Mexican orgs, ITD and IFADE and ODD. Yeah. Hector Cruzado was trained as a supervisor with us, but somehow, just like you, he wound up the ED of his org.
I remember. Through
attrition. And I remember, they won the birthday game 3 years in a row or whatever. And then, I saw him here at Flag sometime after that, and I'm like, oh man, the org must be huge. He's like, not really. I'm like, what do you mean? They make it sound like the Mexican orgs are massive. And he's like, right? And I'll tell you what, so Mark Hadley recently told me that at International Management, it was common knowledge that day coincident with the golden age of tech, every single international statistic went into a long-term downtrend.
Oh, wow.
Common knowledge. As we sit here and discuss this right now, it seems to me that that alone could possibly explain David Miscavige's gradual decline into, I don't know, a paranoid schizophrenic state. He knows that everyone on the international base knows that his big push destroyed stats, and he has to compulsively go into blaming people. You're the reason, you're the reason, you're the reason, you're the reason.
Right.
Scientology lives and breathes on statistics.
Right. Well, date coincidence when the abuse started being reported was what, like 98, 99, 2000 time period?
When you say reported, like
well, when it's been reported by the
St. Pete Times?
St. Pete Times, but like when people actually started, like when did Mike Rinder go into the hole? When did Headley go into the hole? I mean, like when did all these people start going?
2002, 3, 4.
Okay.
That was much later.
Okay. All right. But like when did the demise start getting recognized by everyone though, or when did the real downtrend statistically started taking effect? Because it takes, I mean, to screw something up that's working well, it takes a while to completely.
I think, and again, memory is imperfect. I think I've asked Mike and Mark a question like, at what point did EDN stop being EDN? At what point did the management structure just start getting dismantled? And it was by or before 2000. So it was, in the recent aftermath of the Golden Age attack. I remember being told that by 2000, and again, memory being imperfect.
Right.
I remember being told by 2000, these guys were not actually being execs anymore.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to think about it because I can probably trace down what was coming down, because by around that time I was an ED or receiving more information than a core supervisor would be.
Right.
I could probably point out. Give me a little time to think about it, but yeah. It was, yeah, there was definitely some desperation that was starting. I was starting to feel it as a supervisor, like, well, if we spend so much time with him and effort with him going to flag, why isn't the org booming?
Right.
Which was the quick answer of, because you're not taking advantage of what I can do. That's why. I mean, come on, I can do everything, right?
Right. Cool. Well, if we want to do any more of this, just let me know anytime.
Absolutely. So thank you. Just some feedback from the video we did a couple days ago. I've gotten reconnected with several people that are out of Scientology in the Buffalo area, which has been very nice. I don't want to get into any specific names. I actually had someone connect with me on Facebook and bitch me out.
Seriously?
Yes, which was awesome.
Save that. Don't delete it.
No, I saved it. No, she was right. Her timeline for me was wrong, because it had to do with her husband and the effects of Scientology. And I was actually doing, someone before me had been trying to pull him into the church and get him on staff, and I was keeping him away to take care of his family. And we actually ended up having a very nice chat with each other.
Oh, okay.
So it was but it was good, because I saw it and I'm like, yeah, I didn't do that. So
this person wasn't like a current active Scientologist.
Her husband at one point was an active Scientologist, no longer.
No, but she wasn't like messaging you as a current Scientologist, being like, "How
no,
go into the dark side." Okay.
No. So that was good. I mean, I'm sure I'm gonna get a few of those, because I pissed off a few people over the years.
Did you see my video? It was actually at the end of the video about the Matrix and disconnection, where I read some messages that I got from Scientologists on Facebook.
No, I might not have finished that one.
Okay? All right.
I'll go back and watch.
At the last 10 minutes or something.
Okay.
I was going to mention it because one of the people, but I guess we won't say his name. It's fine.
Okay, I'll figure it out when you're talking or when you're in the video.
You won't.
I won't?
You won't figure it out. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll talk after. All right, man. Great talk.
Great. Thank you so much. And yeah, have a good night.
Bye-bye.